The thunder rolled across the sky like a herd of wild mustangs, as Felicity Gaines pressed her body against the wooden beams of her family's homestead, watching with terror as the Cimarron River swelled beyond its boundaries. April 1876 had brought unprecedented rains to the Oklahoma Territory, and now nature was demanding payment in full. "Pa!" Felicity screamed over the howling wind, her honey-blonde hair whipping across her face. At 22, she had seen drought, disease, and the occasional Indian raid, but nothing had prepared her for the wall of water now racing toward their modest farm. Her father had ridden out at dawn to check on their neighbors, leaving her alone with her mother who lay bedridden with fever. The water crashed against the lower portion of their home, the foundation groaning under the pressure. Felicity rushed inside, her sodden skirts hampering her movements as she made her way to her mother's room. "Mama, we need to leave now," she urged, helping the frail woman into a sitting position. Elizabeth Gaines had been fighting pneumonia for nearly a week, her breathing labored and skin burning with fever. "The river," her mother whispered, her eyes glazed with illness. "It's coming for us." "We have to get to higher ground," Felicity explained, trying to keep the panic from her voice as she helped her mother to her feet. A tremendous crack split the air as one of the support beams in the main room gave way. Water began pouring through the floorboards, rising quickly around their ankles. "Lord have mercy," her mother breathed, clinging to Felicity's arm. The door burst open, startling both women. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the stormy sky, water dripping from his wide-brimmed hat and long oilskin coat. "Anyone alive in here?" a deep voice called out. "Here." "We're in here," Felicity shouted back. The man strode through the ankle-deep water with purpose, his spurs jingling with each step. When he reached the bedroom doorway, Felicity could finally make out his features. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 25 or 6, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the sky after a storm. "Name's Cole Hawkins, madam," he said, tipping his hat briefly. "Your daddy sent me. The bridge is gone, and he's helping the Millers get to safety. Asked me to come fetch you both." Relief washed over Felicity, but it was short-lived as another ominous crack echoed through the house. "My mother's ill," she explained quickly. "She can barely walk." Cole assessed the situation with a quick glance. No time for niceties then. Without hesitation, he scooped Elizabeth into his arms. "Follow close behind me, miss. My horse is just outside." They made their way through the main room where the water had risen to mid-calf. The house groaned around them, timbers protesting as the flood undermined their footings. Outside, the rain continued to fall in sheets. Cole's horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, stood nervously at what remained of their front porch, its eyes rolling at the encroaching water. "Steady, Phoenix," Cole murmured to the animal as he carefully handed Elizabeth up to Felicity, who had already mounted. "Hold her tight now." Felicity cradled her mother against her chest, feeling the heat of her fever even through their wet clothes. Cole swung himself into the saddle behind them both, his chest pressing against Felicity's back as he reached around to take the reins. "We need to head for Coyote Ridge," he shouted over the roar of the water. "It's our best chance." The horse lunged forward, powerful legs churning through the rising water. Felicity glanced back just in time to see the front wall of their home collapse, disappearing beneath the muddy torrent. "My home," she whispered, tears mingling with the rain on her face. "Forward is the only way now, Miss Gaines," Cole said, his breath warm against her ear. "Hold tight to your mama." The rain was relentless, reducing visibility to mere yards ahead. Cole guided his horse with expert precision, avoiding submerged obstacles and treacherous currents. Felicity could feel the animal's muscles straining beneath them as it fought against the power of the flood. They passed the remains of the Jackson farm, the roof of the barn barely visible above the churning water. There was no sign of life. Felicity sent up a silent prayer for the family she had known since childhood. "The water's rising too fast," Cole called out. "We need to get to higher ground now." He steered Phoenix toward a gentle slope that led away from the river valley, but the ground had turned to slick mud under the deluge. The horses' hooves slipped, nearly sending all three riders tumbling into the flood. "Come on, boy," Cole encouraged, patting the animal's straining neck. "You can do this." Phoenix snorted and redoubled his efforts, finding purchase on the treacherous incline. They climbed steadily, the water receding behind them until they reached a small copse of oak trees that offered minimal shelter from the driving rain. Cole dismounted and helped Felicity down, then carefully lifted Elizabeth from her arms. "We'll rest here a moment, let Phoenix catch his breath." "Will we make it to Coyote Ridge?" Felicity asked, wringing water from her skirt. Cole's expression was grim as he surveyed the valley below, now transformed into a vast, violent lake. "The way ahead is cut off. The water's moving too fast." He glanced at Elizabeth, who had begun to shiver violently despite her fever. "And your mother needs shelter soon. What are our options?" "My cabin," Cole said after a moment's consideration. "It's built on a rise about 3 miles east of here. It's not much, but it's dry and sturdy." Felicity nodded, not seeing any alternative. "Lead the way, Mr. Hawkins. Call me Cole, Miss Gaines." "Formalities seem a bit foolish in our current situation." "Then I'm Felicity," she replied, managing a small smile despite their dire circumstances. Cole returned the smile, a brief flash of warmth in the cold downpour. "Let's get your mother somewhere safe, Felicity." They continued eastward, the terrain becoming increasingly difficult. Twice they had to ford newly formed streams that cut across their path. Phoenix carried them valiantly, but Felicity could feel the exhaustion in the animal's labored breathing. Elizabeth's condition worsened as they traveled, her body alternating between burning hot and alarmingly cold. She drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring incoherently about her late husband and calling for Felicity's father. "How much further?" Felicity asked, anxiety tightening her chest as her mother's breathing grew more labored. "Just over that ridge," Cole assured her, pointing to a tree-lined hill ahead. As they crested the hill, Felicity saw a modest cabin nestled among a stand of pines. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, a beacon of hope in the gray deluge. "You have someone staying with you?" she asked, surprised by the sign of life. "My younger brother, Caleb. He tends things when I'm away." They approached the cabin, and before Cole could call out, the door swung open. A lanky young man of about 19 stood in the doorway, a rifle held casually in one hand. "About time you showed up," he called out. "Was starting to think you'd washed away." His expression changed when he noticed the two women. "You brought company." "The Gaines farm is gone," Cole explained as he dismounted. "Miss Felicity here and her mother need shelter. Her father's helping the Millers." Caleb immediately set the rifle aside and moved to help. "Get them inside. I've got stew on and the fire's going strong." Within minutes, they were inside the snug cabin. It was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and 2 doors leading to what Felicity presumed were bedrooms. "Take my room," Cole said, carrying Elizabeth through one of the doorways. "The bed's bigger." Felicity followed, helping to settle her mother on the neat bed. Elizabeth's face was flushed with fever, her breathing shallow. "She needs dry clothes and medicine," Felicity said, pressing a hand to her mother's forehead. "I'll fetch some of my things for you both to change into," Cole offered. "And we have willow bark for the fever." Left alone with her mother, Felicity took stock of their situation. They were alive, which seemed miraculous given the destruction they had witnessed. But her mother's condition was grave, and she had no idea if her father had made it to safety. Their home and everything they owned was likely destroyed. Cole returned with clothing and a steaming mug. "Willow bark tea," he explained, setting the mug on a small table beside the bed. "And these are the smallest clothes I could find. They'll swallow you whole, but they're dry." "Thank you," Felicity said, suddenly overwhelmed by his kindness, "for everything we would have." "No need for that," Cole interrupted gently. "Anyone would have done the same, but they both knew that wasn't true. In the harsh reality of frontier life, many would have looked to their own survival first." "I'll give you privacy to change," Cole said, backing toward the door. "Call if you need anything." Once alone, Felicity helped her mother into one of Cole's soft flannel shirts, which indeed engulfed her frail frame. She changed herself next, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs of the borrowed clothing. The material carried the scent of sunshine and pine Cole's scent. She realized with a strange flutter in her chest. After ensuring her mother had drunk some of the medicinal tea, Felicity rejoined the men in the main room. Cole had changed into dry clothing as well and was stoking the fire while Caleb ladled stew into bowls. "How is she?" Cole asked, straightening as Felicity entered. "The tea seems to have eased her breathing somewhat, but the fever hasn't broken." "You should eat," Caleb said, offering her a bowl. "Can't take care of your ma if you're falling over from hunger." The stew was simple but hearty, and Felicity hadn't realized how famished she was until the first spoonful touched her lips. They ate in relative silence, the patter of rain on the roof and the occasional crack of thunder the only sounds. "The storm's moving east," Cole observed, glancing out the window. "But the water won't recede for days." "What of my father?" Felicity asked, setting her empty bowl aside. "If he made it to the Millers, they'll have headed for Fort Supply. The Army's likely organizing rescue efforts already," Cole assured her. "As soon as it's safe to travel, I'll ride out and find news." "I should go with you," Felicity insisted. Cole shook his head. "Your mother needs you here. And the terrain will be dangerous mudslides, broken bridges, not to mention the possibility of outlaws taking advantage of the chaos." "He's right," Caleb added. "Besides, Cole knows this territory better than anyone. If your pa's out there, he'll find him." Felicity wanted to argue but knew they were right. Her mother's condition required constant attention, and she would only slow Cole down if she insisted on accompanying him. "2 days," Cole said. "If the rain stops tonight as it seems it might, I'll leave at first light the day after tomorrow." "Thank you," Felicity said, meeting his gaze. In the warm light of the cabin, his eyes were even more striking clear blue with flecks of gray, like the sky clearing after a storm. That night, Felicity slept on a pallet beside her mother's bed, waking frequently to check her fever and administer more willow bark tea. By morning, Elizabeth's fever had abated slightly, and she was lucid enough to take some broth. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. "Safe," Felicity assured her. "A man named Cole Hawkins rescued us from the flood. We're in his cabin." Elizabeth's eyes widened with recognition. "Hawkins, the rancher from up north. I don't know much about him," Felicity admitted, "only that he saved our lives." Her mother smiled faintly. "Your father spoke of him, said he was one of the few honest cattlemen in these parts." This revelation intrigued Felicity. She had assumed Cole was a cowhand or perhaps a small farmer like themselves. The idea that he might own a ranch suggested resources and standing she hadn't suspected. Later that morning, when she emerged from the bedroom, she found Cole preparing to go out. "Thought I'd check the damage, see if any of our neighbors need help," he explained, pulling on his hat. Caleb will stay here in case you need anything. My mother knows of you, Felicity said, watching his reaction. She says my father spoke highly of your honesty. A slight flush colored Cole's tanned cheeks. Your father helped me when I first arrived here 5 years ago, taught me a lot about this land and its ways. He hesitated, then added, I owe him a debt I can never fully repay, but I aim to try. With that, he nodded and stepped outside into the misty morning. Through the window, Felicity watched him mount Phoenix and ride toward the now visible valley below. The floodwaters still covered much of the landscape, but the rain had stopped, and patches of blue sky peeked through the clouds. He's a good man, Caleb said, coming to stand beside her. Stubborn as a mule sometimes, but good to his core. How did you come to be here? Felicity asked, curious about the brothers. Caleb's expression sobered. Our folks died of cholera in '71. Cole was barely 20, me just 14. He could have sent me to an orphanage, would have been easier on him. Instead, he worked 3 jobs in Kansas City until he'd saved enough to buy a small herd. We drove those cattle here ourselves and started building. Everything we have, we owe to his determination. Felicity felt a new respect bloom for the man who had rescued them. And now, he has a successful ranch, getting there, Caleb said with a proud smile. We've got 100 head of Herefords, some of the best stock in the territory. Just hired our first 2 hands last month. The day passed slowly. Felicity tended to her mother, whose condition continued to improve gradually. Caleb proved to be an amiable companion, sharing stories of their lives that made Felicity laugh despite their circumstances. Cole returned as dusk approached, his expression grim. The valley's in bad shape, he reported, removing his mud-spattered coat. The Parsons place is completely gone. Found them taking shelter in what's left of their barn. Sent them to the McDowells up on the ridge. Their place survived mostly intact. Did you see any sign of my father? Felicity asked anxiously. Cole shook his head. No, but that's not surprising if he headed for Fort Supply with the Millers. The road that way is on higher ground. That night, as a full moon broke through the dispersing clouds, Felicity stepped outside for a moment of solitude. The air was crisp and clean after the storm, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. She didn't hear Cole approach until he spoke. Beautiful night. Felicity startled slightly, but then nodded. Hard to believe the same sky that brought such destruction can look so peaceful now. Nature doesn't hold grudges or play favorites, Cole said, coming to stand beside her. It simply is what it is, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, looking out over the moonlit landscape. In the distance, the swollen river reflected the silver light, its destructive power tamed for now into something almost serene. I've been thinking, Cole said eventually. When I ride out to find news of your father, I should also assess what's left of your farm. There might be belongings that could be salvaged. The thought of returning to the scene of destruction filled Felicity with dread, but she appreciated his practical thinking. That would be kind of you. Not kindness, Cole corrected gently. Neighborliness. It's how we survive out here. Felicity turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time since their rescue. In the moonlight, his features were softened, the hard lines of determination relaxed into something more approachable. A strand of dark hair had fallen across his forehead, and she felt an unexpected urge to brush it back. Still, she said softly, there are many who wouldn't have risked their lives as you did. I won't forget it. Cole met her gaze, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding, of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. You should rest, he said finally, breaking the spell. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Felicity nodded and turned to go back inside. At the door, She paused and looked back. Cole remained where she had left him, his silhouette strong and steady against the night sky. For the first time since the flood, she felt a flutter of something other than fear in her heart. True to his word, Cole departed at dawn 2 days later. The skies had cleared completely, revealing the extent of the flood's devastation. From the cabin's vantage point, Felicity could see vast stretches of the valley still underwater, though the river had retreated somewhat to its newly widened banks. "I'll return by nightfall if possible," Cole told her as he checked Phoenix's saddle. "If not, don't worry. It might mean I've found your father and am helping him back." "Please be careful," Felicity said, handing him a bundle of provisions she and Caleb had prepared. "The land is treacherous after such flooding." Cole's eyes softened as he took the bundle, his fingers brushing against hers. "I've navigated worse. Take care of your mother and don't let Caleb burn down the cabin with his cooking." "I heard that," Caleb called from the doorway, feigning offense. "My cooking's improved considerable since last month's incident." Their banter brought a smile to Felicity's face, a welcome respite from the worry that had been her constant companion. As Cole mounted and rode away, Felicity felt a curious emptiness, as though his departure had taken something vital with it. She shook off the feeling, attributing it to general anxiety rather than anything specific to Cole himself. The day stretched endlessly. Felicity occupied herself with caring for her mother, whose strength was returning slowly but steadily. By afternoon, Elizabeth was able to sit up in a chair by the fire, wrapped in one of Cole's quilts. "Tell me more about this young man who rescued us," Elizabeth said, watching her daughter prepare a simple stew. "There's not much to tell," Felicity replied, focusing on chopping carrots. "He seems to be a respected rancher, has a small but growing herd of cattle. His brother Caleb lives with him. And he risked his life to save 2 strangers," Elizabeth added pointedly. Felicity glanced up, catching the knowing look in her mother's eyes. "As would any decent person." "Perhaps," Elizabeth conceded, though her tone suggested she believed otherwise. "He's quite handsome, isn't he?" "Mother," Felicity admonished, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Our home is destroyed, father is missing, and you're matchmaking." Elizabeth smiled serenely. "Life continues, dear, even in the midst of tragedy, sometimes especially then." Felicity had no response to this wisdom, so she returned her attention to the stew, aware that her mother's eyes remained on her, thoughtful and knowing. Dusk came and went with no sign of Cole. Caleb assured Felicity this was not cause for alarm. The terrain was difficult, and Cole was thorough in his investigations. Still, she found herself watching the window as darkness fell completely, straining to hear the sound of hoofbeats over the gentle evening breeze. It was nearly midnight when Phoenix's distinctive whinny announced their return. Felicity, who had been dozing in a chair by the fire, rushed to the door. Cole dismounted wearily, his clothes mud-spattered and his face drawn with exhaustion. "Any news?" she asked anxiously. Cole nodded, leading his horse toward the small stable attached to the cabin. "Your father is alive and well at Fort Supply. The Millers, too." Relief washed over Felicity in a dizzying wave. "Thank God," she breathed. "The fort is organizing relief efforts," Cole continued as he removed Phoenix's saddle. "Your father is helping coordinate. He asked that you and your mother remain here until he can come for you, likely within the week once the roads are passable again." "And our farm?" Felicity asked, though she already knew the answer from Cole's expression. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "The house is gone, along with most of the outbuildings. The barn is still standing, though damaged. I found some of your belongings scattered downstream, a trunk of clothing, some books, a few cooking implements. I've secured what I could in the barn for now." Felicity nodded, accepting the news with as much grace as she could muster. They had expected as much, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a physical blow. "Thank you for going," she said quietly. "Knowing Father is safe means everything." Cole finished tending to Phoenix and joined her as they walked back to the cabin. "Your father is a resilient man. He's already making plans to rebuild. Said to tell you he's never been more grateful that he insisted on building the barn on higher ground, against your mother's aesthetic objections." This unexpected detail, so characteristic of her parents' good-natured disagreements, brought both tears and laughter to Felicity. "That sounds exactly like them," she said, wiping her eyes. Inside, Caleb had kept the fire going and had a plate of food waiting for his brother. Cole ate quickly, the exhaustion of the day evident in every movement. "You should rest," Felicity told him when he'd finished. "You've done more than enough today." Cole looked as though he might argue, but then nodded in agreement. "Wake me if your mother needs anything," he said before disappearing into Caleb's room, where he had been sleeping since giving up his own bed to Elizabeth. The next several days established a rhythm to their shared life in the cabin. Cole and Caleb continued to help neighbors affected by the flood, bringing back news and occasionally survivors who needed temporary shelter before continuing to Fort Supply. Felicity and her mother, whose health improved daily, took over the domestic duties, cooking meals and keeping the cabin in order. Felicity found herself watching Cole when he wasn't aware the way his hands moved confidently as he repaired damaged tools, the gentle way he spoke to Phoenix, the rare but transformative smile that appeared when his brother told one of his outlandish stories. Each observation added another layer to her understanding of this man, who had saved them from the flood's fury. For his part, Cole seemed increasingly aware of Felicity as well. She would catch him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something between admiration and uncertainty. He sought out her company in small ways, asking her opinion on matters that could have easily been decided without her input, bringing her wildflowers he claimed to have found along the way during his daily rides. 5 days after Cole's return with news of her father, Felicity was hanging laundry to dry in the spring sunshine when Cole approached, leading Phoenix. "Thought you might like to see what's left of your farm," he said, an offer rather than a suggestion. "The waters receded enough to make it safe, and it might help to see it before your father returns." Felicity hesitated, torn between dread and a need for closure. "I'd like that," she decided finally. "Let me tell Mother where I'm going." Soon they were riding together, Felicity seated in front of Cole just as they had been during their escape from the flood. This time, however, the experience was entirely different. Instead of fear and desperation, Felicity was acutely aware of the solid warmth of Cole's chest against her back, the strength in his arms as they reached around her to hold the reins. The landscape was transformed. Where lush fields and homesteads had stood, there was now a patchwork of mud, debris, and standing water. Trees had been uprooted, fences washed away, the very contours of the land altered by the flood's ravaging force. When they crested the hill overlooking the Gaines farm, Felicity's breath caught painfully in her throat. Cole had not exaggerated. The house was simply gone, with only the stone chimney standing as a monument to what had been. The barn, situated on a slightly higher rise, remained, though its roof was partially collapsed and one wall had been torn away. "I want to go down there," Felicity said, her voice steadier than she felt. Cole guided Phoenix carefully down the muddy slope. As they approached the chimney, Felicity saw small items scattered around a bent cooking pot, the metal frame of a chair, a sodden book whose pages were fused together by mud and water. "Wait," Cole said, dismounting and then helping her down. The ground still unstable in places. He held her hand as they picked their way through the debris. Felicity moved in a daze, occasionally stopping to touch some remnant of her former life, the carved wooden box her father had made for her 16th birthday, now cracked and water-stained. A china teacup, miraculously unbroken, that had been her grandmother's. "It's strange," she said finally, standing where the front door had once been. "I feel as though I should be more devastated, but seeing it like this, it's just things, isn't it? Things that can be replaced." Cole squeezed her hand gently. "Not all of them. Some things carry memories that can't be duplicated." His understanding touched her deeply. "Yes," she agreed softly, "but the most important things survived. My mother, my father, our lives." They made their way to the barn where Cole had gathered what salvageable items he could find. It wasn't much, some clothing, tools, a few household items, but each piece felt like a victory against the flood's destructive power. "My father's going to have to start almost from scratch," Felicity observed, surveying the damaged fields around them. The rich soil that had nurtured their crops had been scoured away in places, replaced by gravel and sand carried by the floodwaters. "He won't be alone," Cole said. "The community will help. I'll help." Felicity turned to look at him, struck by the simple sincerity of his offer. "Why?" she asked. "You barely know us." Cole's eyes met hers, clear and direct. "I know enough," he said quietly. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first desperate ride through the flood. Felicity felt it like a physical change in the air, a new current that pulled them inexorably toward each other. Before either could speak further, the sound of approaching horses broke the spell. They turned to see a small group of riders coming down the road that led to their farm. "That's my father," Felicity exclaimed, recognizing the lead rider's distinctive posture even at a distance. She ran toward the approaching group, heedless of the mud that splashed onto her borrowed trousers. Her father, Thomas Gaines, dismounted quickly and caught her in a fierce embrace. "My girl," he murmured into her hair. "My brave, clever girl." "Mother's well," Felicity assured him immediately. "Her fever broke days ago. She's regaining her strength." Thomas held her at arm's length, examining her face as though to reassure himself she was truly unharmed. "And you? You're truly all right. Thanks to Cole," she said, turning to where Cole stood respectfully a few paces away. "He saved us both." Thomas strode forward and clasped Cole's hand firmly. "Hawkins, I don't have words adequate to thank you." "No thanks needed, sir," Cole replied. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Thomas countered, "and not in that flood. You risked your life for my family. That's a debt I can never repay." "Consider it payment for all you taught me when I first arrived here," Cole said. "Without your guidance, I wouldn't have the ranch I have today." Thomas smiled, clapping Cole on the shoulder. "Well, we can argue about who owes whom later. Right now, I want to see my wife." The group, Thomas, Cole, Felicity, and the two men who had accompanied her father from Fort Supply, rode back to Cole's cabin. The reunion between Thomas and Elizabeth was tender and joyful, bringing tears to Felicity's eyes as she witnessed their deep love for each other. That evening, as they shared a celebratory meal, Thomas outlined his plans. "The Army's providing temporary shelter at the fort for those who lost their homes. We'll go there tomorrow while I secure supplies to begin rebuilding." "You're welcome to stay here," Cole offered. "There's no need to travel to the fort if Mrs. Gaines isn't fully recovered." Thomas exchanged a look with his wife. "That's generous, but we couldn't impose further. You've already done so much." "It's no imposition," Cole insisted. "The cabin is cramped but serviceable. And I have business at the fort myself in a few days. I can help transport your supplies back here when I return." The discussion continued, with practical considerations weighed against pride and propriety. In the end, it was Elizabeth who settled the matter. "I think," she said with quiet authority, "that staying here while we begin to rebuild makes the most sense. The fort is crowded and the journey would be taxing. If Mr. Hawkins is certain we're not an imposition, I would prefer to remain." And so it was decided. Thomas would return to Fort Supply the next day with one of the men who had accompanied him, while the other would stay behind to help begin clearing the Gaines property. Cole and Caleb offered their assistance as well, creating a plan to salvage what they could and prepare for rebuilding. That night, as the household settled into sleep, Felicity found herself unable to rest. She slipped outside into the cool night air, wrapping a borrowed shawl around her shoulders as she gazed up at the star-filled sky. She heard the door open behind her and knew without turning that it was Cole. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Too many thoughts," she admitted. "Everything has changed so quickly." "Change isn't always for the worse," Cole said softly. Felicity turned to look at him, finding his gaze already on her. "No," she agreed. "Sometimes it brings unexpected blessings." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then, with gentle deliberation, Cole reached out and took her hand in his. "Felicity," he began, his voice low and earnest, "I know this isn't the proper time or place, but the flood has taught me that waiting for the perfect moment is a luxury we might not always have." Her heart quickened, both at his touch and his words. "What are you saying, Cole?" "I'm saying that in the short time I've known you, I've come to admire you more than any woman I've ever met. Your courage, your devotion to your family, your resilience. They've captured something in me I didn't know was there to be captured." Felicity's breath caught in her throat. "We barely know each other," she whispered, though her heart argued otherwise. "Don't we?" Cole challenged gently. "Haven't we seen each other at our most vulnerable? In crisis, pretenses fall away, leaving only truth. And the truth is, I care for you, Felicity Gaines. More than I thought possible in so short a time." The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. Felicity felt herself trembling, not from fear but from the overwhelming rightness of the moment. "I care for you too," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the night sounds around them. "When you rode away to find news of my father, I realized how quickly you had become important to me." Cole's smile transformed his face, erasing the habitual seriousness that usually marked his expression. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers, a kiss as gentle as a promise, as profound as a vow. When they parted, Felicity felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her world, as dramatic as the flood that had changed the landscape, but infinitely more welcome. "We should return inside," Cole said reluctantly. "Your father might not appreciate finding us here alone." Felicity smiled, squeezing his hand. "My father trusts my judgment, and I think he already holds you in high regard." "Even so," Cole replied with a wry smile, "I'd prefer not to test that regard unnecessarily." The following weeks established a new pattern to their lives. Thomas returned from Fort Supply with supplies and began the arduous process of rebuilding, assisted by Cole, Caleb, and several neighbors whose own properties had been spared the worst of the flooding. The barn was repaired first, providing shelter for the few animals that had survived and storage for rebuilding materials. Felicity and Elizabeth divided their time between Cole's cabin and the Gaines property, preparing meals for the workers and salvaging what they could from the mud and debris. It was exhausting, often disheartening work, but there was a sense of community that buoyed their spirits, a shared determination to reclaim what the flood had taken. Throughout it all, Felicity and Cole found moments to be alone together, brief interludes that deepened their connection and confirmed what they had recognized that night outside his cabin. They spoke of their pasts, their hopes, their fears, building a foundation of understanding that transcended the unusual circumstances of their meeting. One evening, as they walked along a ridge overlooking both properties, Cole's thriving ranch to the east, the Gaines' slowly rebuilding farm to the west, Cole stopped and turned to face Felicity. "I've been thinking," he said, taking both her hands in his, "about the future." Felicity's heart quickened at his serious tone. "What about it? Your father estimates it will take at least until late summer to rebuild your house properly. That's 3 more months of your family living in my cabin. Are you asking us to leave?" Felicity asked, confusion and hurt mingling in her voice. "Just the opposite," Cole said quickly. "I'm suggesting a more permanent arrangement, for you at least." He took a deep breath, then continued, "I love you, Felicity. I think I began falling in love with you the moment I saw you standing in that flooded house, determined to save your mother despite the danger to yourself." Tears sprang to Felicity's eyes at his declaration. "Cole, please let me finish," he said gently. "I know it's soon. I know that under normal circumstances, we would court properly for months or even years. But these aren't normal circumstances, and I don't want to wait. Life is too uncertain, too precious to waste in unnecessary delay." With that, he released one of her hands and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small silver ring set with a modest sapphire. "This was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing of value I have from her. I'd be honored if you would wear it, as my wife." Felicity stared at the ring, then at Cole's face, earnest, vulnerable, hopeful. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty what her answer would be. "Yes," she said simply, her voice steady despite the tears that now flowed freely down her cheeks. "I will marry you, Cole Hawkins." Joy transformed his features as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large, but that seemed a small detail in the face of their happiness. Cole pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless. "We should tell our families," Felicity said when they finally parted. "Together." Cole nodded, keeping one arm around her waist as they turned back toward the cabin. "Your father might have some objections to the timing," he cautioned. "Perhaps," Felicity conceded. "But he respects you, and he wants my happiness above all. My mother already adores you. I think she's been hoping for this outcome since you rescued us." That evening, they announced their engagement to both families over dinner. Thomas was initially concerned about the haste, as Cole had predicted, but Elizabeth's obvious delight and Caleb's enthusiastic approval helped sway him. "You're certain?" he asked Felicity privately when they had a moment alone. "This isn't gratitude or a reaction to all we've lost?" "I'm certain," Felicity assured him. "What I feel for Cole goes far beyond gratitude. I love him, Pa, and I believe we can build a good life together." Thomas studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Then you have my blessing. Cole is a good man, one of the best I know, and he clearly adores you." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony performed by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Fort Supply. The entire community attended, seeing in their union a symbol of renewal and hope after the devastation of the flood. Felicity wore a new dress that Elizabeth had sewn from fabric purchased at the fort's trading post. Cole, unaccustomed to formal attire, nevertheless appeared in a new shirt and string tie, his dark hair neatly combed and his boots polished to a shine. "You are so beautiful," he whispered as they stood together before the preacher, his eyes filled with a wonder that made Felicity's heart soar. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with profound sincerity promises to love, honor, and cherish through all the uncertainties that frontier life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that rose from the assembled community seemed to finally banish the shadow of the flood that had brought them together. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music provided by a fiddler from a neighboring ranch and food contributed by everyone who attended. As twilight deepened into night, Cole led Felicity away from the festivities toward two horses waiting patiently nearby. "Where are we going?" she asked, curious rather than concerned. Cole smiled mysteriously. "I have a surprise for you. Trust me." "Always," she replied without hesitation. They rode for about 20 minutes, following a trail that wound through stands of pine and across gentle hills. As they crested a particularly scenic rise, Felicity gasped at what she saw below. A small cabin, newly built and gleaming in the moonlight, stood in a clearing surrounded by wildflowers. A lantern hung on the porch, its warm glow a beacon of welcome in the gathering darkness. "What is this?" Felicity asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Our home," Cole said simply. "Caleb and I built it while your father was rebuilding your family's place. It's not large, but it's sturdy, and it's built high enough that no flood will ever threaten it." Tears of happiness filled Felicity's eyes as Cole helped her dismount and led her toward the cabin. "When did you find time? How did you keep it a secret?" "I have my ways," Cole replied, smiling at her amazement. "And motivated men can accomplish a great deal in a short time." Inside, the cabin was simple but beautifully crafted. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, already laid with wood ready to light. The furniture was sparse but well made: a table and chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, and through an open doorway, Felicity could see a bedroom with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt. "It's perfect," she breathed, turning to embrace her husband. "Absolutely perfect." Cole's arms encircled her, drawing her close. "Not quite perfect yet," he murmured against her hair, "but it will be now that you're here." Later, as they lay together in their new bed, the soft glow of the fire the only light in the room, Felicity marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "If the river hadn't flooded," she mused, tracing lazy patterns on Cole's chest, "we might never have met. Or at least not like this." Cole captured her hand and brought it to his lips. "I prefer to think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be, flood or no flood." "Is that what we are meant to be?" Felicity asked, smiling up at him. "Without a doubt," Cole affirmed, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache with happiness. "Some men search their whole lives for what I found the moment I saw you standing in that flooded house." 1 year later, Felicity stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching as Cole rode in from checking their growing herd of cattle. In her arms, their 2-month-old son, Thomas Caleb Hawkins, slept peacefully, unaware of the significance of the date. It was exactly 1 year since the Cimarron had broken its banks, sweeping away Felicity's old life and, in its place, bringing her something infinitely more precious. Cole dismounted and climbed the steps to join her, pressing a kiss to her lips before gently touching their son's downy head. "Happy anniversary," he said softly. Felicity leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him. "Who would have thought that day when you rode through the flood to rescue us, that we'd be standing here now?" "I knew," Cole said with quiet certainty. "Not consciously, perhaps. But somewhere inside, I knew from that first moment that my life had changed forever." As if in agreement, little Thomas stirred and opened his eyes the exact shade of blue as his father's. "He has your eyes," Felicity observed, not for the first time. "And your spirit," Cole added, smiling as the baby's tiny hand closed around his finger. Poor child is doomed to stubbornness from both sides. Felicity laughed, the sound carrying across the property that they had built together a thriving cattle ranch that had doubled in size over the past year, with prospects of continued growth as demand for beef increased with the expanding railroad. The original Gaines farm had been rebuilt as well, though with modifications that reflected the lessons of the flood. Thomas and Elizabeth now lived in a sturdy two-story house situated well above the river's reach, with fields replanted and even expanded thanks to the rich silt deposited by the floodwaters. Caleb had his own small cabin nearby, though he spent most of his time with Cole and Felicity, doting on his nephew and continuing to help with the ranch operations. He had recently started courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, bringing a new dimension of teasing to the siblings' relationship as Cole returned years of brotherly ribbing with interest. "You ever regret it?" Cole asked suddenly, his expression serious as he looked out over their land. "Marrying me so quickly, choosing this life instead of returning to your family's farm," Felicity considered the question, though she already knew her answer. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "The flood may have washed away my childhood home, but it brought me to you. It showed me what truly matters." She looked down at their son, then back at her husband. "And this you, Thomas, our family, this is what matters most." Cole's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I thank God every day for bringing you into my life, even through such terrible circumstances." "As do I," Felicity agreed, though perhaps next time he could use a less dramatic method. Cole laughed, the sound rich and warm in the late afternoon sunlight. "I don't know. I'm rather fond of our story. How many couples can say a flood brought them together?" "Not many," Felicity conceded with a smile. "It's certainly a tale we'll tell Thomas when he's older." They stood together on the porch until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land they had claimed as their own. In the distance, the Cimarron River flowed peacefully within its banks, its power temporarily tamed but never forgotten. "I love you, Felicity Hawkins," Cole said as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," Felicity replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "My cowboy who carried me through the flood to safety, and into a life more beautiful than I could have imagined." As night fell completely, they went inside together, closing the door on the anniversary of the day that had nearly taken everything from Felicity, but had instead given her everything she now held dear. The river that had broken through its banks had, in its destructive power, carved a new channel for their lives, one that had led them to each other, and to a love as enduring as the land itself. 5 years later, Felicity sat in the rocking chair on their expanded porch, watching as Cole taught their son Thomas, now 6, to throw a lasso. Beside them, 3-year-old Elizabeth Lizzie to the family clapped her hands in delight as her brother's rope settled around the practice post Cole had set up. "Mama, look," Thomas called, his face alight with pride. "I did it. Wonderful." Felicity called back, shifting slightly to accommodate the weight of the baby growing inside her. At 7 months along, she found herself tiring more easily with this pregnancy than she had with the previous 2. Cole noticed her discomfort and immediately ended the lesson. "That's enough for today, partner," he told Thomas. "Why don't you and Lizzie go see if Uncle Caleb needs help feeding the chickens?" The children raced off toward the chicken coop where Caleb, now married with a child of his own on the way, was tossing feed to the flock. His wife, Rebecca, had become a dear friend to Felicity, completing their close-knit family circle. Cole climbed the porch steps and knelt beside Felicity's chair. "How are you feeling?" he asked, placing a gentle hand on her rounded belly. Tired, she admitted, but happy. You should rest more, Cole advised, though he knew his independent wife was unlikely to heed such advice. Felicity smiled and covered his hand with hers. I will. After I finish preserving those peaches Mama brought over yesterday. Cole shook his head in fond exasperation. The peaches can wait. You can't do everything, Felicity. Says the man who built an entire ranch from almost nothing, she countered with a teasing smile. I had help, Cole reminded her. Considerable help, including from the most determined woman west of the Mississippi. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas and Elizabeth Gaines, who had ridden over for their weekly Sunday dinner. In the years since the flood, Thomas had become one of the territory's most respected farmers, known for his innovative techniques and willingness to share his knowledge with newcomers. How's my girl? Thomas asked, climbing the steps to kiss Felicity's cheek. At 62, he was still robust and active, though his hair had turned completely silver. Growing rounder by the day, Felicity replied with a laugh. This one seems determined to be bigger than the others were. Elizabeth, who had maintained her gentle grace despite the hardships they had faced, joined them on the porch. You're carrying low, she observed. I think it might be another boy. Cole's hoping for a girl, Felicity said, smiling up at her husband. He claims Lizzie needs a sister to balance all the male energy around here. A healthy child is all that matters, Cole said diplomatically, though Felicity knew he secretly dreamed of another daughter with her honey blonde hair and determined spirit. As they gathered around the large dining table Cole had crafted the previous winter, Felicity looked at the faces of those she loved most in the world. The flood that had nearly claimed their lives had instead given them this a family bound not just by blood but by shared experience, mutual respect, and enduring love. I was thinking, Cole said as they finished their meal, about expanding the north pasture next spring. The railroad's demand for beef keeps growing, and with the new contract I secured in Kansas City, we could double our herd over the next 3 years. That's ambitious, Thomas commented, though his tone was approving. You'd need more hands. I've been talking with the Wilkinson boys, Cole acknowledged. They're looking for steady work and they know cattle. The conversation continued, plans being made and possibilities explored. Felicity participated, offering suggestions about water access and grazing rotation, but part of her mind drifted back to that desperate day when the river had broken through its banks and changed their lives forever. Later, as the sun set and their guests prepared to leave, Felicity found herself standing with Cole at the exact spot where their original cabin had stood. The larger house they now occupied had been built around it, incorporating the sturdy structure into a home that accommodated their growing family. Penny for your thoughts, Cole said, his arm around her waist. I was remembering, Felicity replied, leaning into his solid warmth. The day of the flood, how terrified I was, how certain I was that Mother and I would die. Cole nodded, his expression somber. I remember riding up and seeing the water already inside your house. My heart nearly stopped when I realized there were people still inside. You never told me you were afraid, Felicity said, looking up at him with surprise. Of course I was afraid, Cole admitted. Only a fool wouldn't have been. But being afraid and giving in to fear are different things, and there was no way I was leaving without you. Felicity reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that years of sun and wind had etched around his eyes. My hero, she said softly, only half teasing. Cole caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. No, he corrected gently. Your partner, your equal. That's what we've always been. From the moment you insisted on helping your mother onto Phoenix despite the danger. They stood together as twilight deepened into night, listening to the distant sound of the Cimarron River flowing peacefully within its banks. The water that had once threatened everything they held dear now nourished their land, sustaining the life they had built together. "I love you, Cole Hawkins," Felicity said, the words as true now as they had been when she first spoke them years ago. "With everything I am." "And I love you," Cole replied, drawing her closer as the first stars appeared overhead. "Yesterday, today, and all the tomorrows we have left." In the house behind them, their children's laughter mingled with the sounds of dishes being cleared and stories being shared. The life they had created together, built from the ruins of flood and loss, continued to flow around them, as constant and life-giving as the river itself. As darkness fell completely, they walked hand in hand back to the warmth and light of their home, their steps in perfect unison, just as they had been since the day a cowboy had held a frightened woman on his horse, until they found safe ground, and in doing so, had found so much more than either could have imagined.